Hey guys, welcome back to another innovation review. Today we're going to be talking about two bikes, the Tahoe and Tahoe GT from E-LUX. And if you are going back and forth like, I don't know if it's worth the extra $1,000 bucks, we're going to go through performance, we're going to go through specs, and see which one of those Tahoes is right for you. Let's get into it. So you're not confused, the Tahoe step-through regular version is going to be our blue bike over here, and our Tahoe step-through GT is going to be on this side. That's the black one. For you who are colorblind, there's a blue bike to my left, there's a black bike to my right. And let's go ahead and talk about some of those specs. Now, if you just look at the bikes, and we'll probably start with geometry. Go ahead and look at these. They are pretty much identical. Maybe you can pick out a couple of things right off the bat, such as the regular Tahoe doesn't have suspension, and we've got an RST on the front forks over here. This one has a straight up and down C-post suspension. That one comes with the NCX from Suntour. So there are some stuff that kind of jump out right at the gate. They both have a step-through frame. They both have similar drivetrains. They both come with a rack, fenders, all that stuff. The saddle on the GT is going to be a little bit nicer. That is an HSS from Surface. That's probably how you pronounce that, Surface. And other than that, a lot of similarities. As we get into the geometry section, you'll see that there's some key differences between them, and the main ones are going to be the height. They're both 81 inches long, so in that respect they're both fairly long bikes. Nice big step through on both of these, and the main difference, as I mentioned, is going to be our seat height, and that's mainly due to the fact that the Suntour NCX on this side is going to give you about 3.5–4 inches for our minimum saddle height. It's going to be higher because you got to fit all that suspension in there. And then this one is going to be a little bit less. And if you put a straight post on here and you didn't want, say, any suspension on here, you could get that seat post down a little bit lower. Now we can get a close-up on that NCX here, and the minimum saddle height on the GT is going to be 37 inches. That's because we got this suspension here we got to fit in, like I mentioned. And then the highest position is going to be 43.5, and it would be 33 inches if we did a straight stem on here, or rather a straight seat tube, or rather a straight seat post. What am I talking about? And then on this side, as you can tell, this could come down quite a bit, and if we had a straight post on here, that would get that down quite a bit as well. So very similar as far as that goes. As I mentioned, there are a couple of other differences. The length, not one of them. They're both fairly long bikes. As far as the width goes, on the Tahoe GT, it's 27 inches, and that's actually because of the brake levers. They don't stick out quite as far on this one as the brake levers do on here. Pretty similar, but the difference is going to be the Tahoe is about 30 inches wide, and then the GT is going to be about 27 inches wide. Now, I measured that. This one is definitely 27. This one, I don't know if it's 30. Seems like it's somewhere around the 28, 29 inch mark as far as where I measured it, but I wasn't measuring it from brake handle to brake handle on this one, so maybe it's about 30 inches. The other thing that's different is our standover height. So the Tahoe is going to be 19 inches. This is a 19-inch standover height, very accessible, and then on the GT, that's going to be 20 inches. So not really much of a difference between 19 and 20, but if you're like, hey, I can't do 20, but I can do 19, then, there we go. We've already eliminated the GT for you, and here's the regular Tahoe. Other than that, as far as geometry goes, it would be the weights. So the weight on the regular Tahoe is 68 pounds. And then once we move over here with some of these other components, we're going to be getting up to 78 pounds. So about a 10-pound difference between these two bikes. They're both kind of in the same ballpark, mid-60s, mid-70s. You sort of handle it about the same way. So very similar as far as the weight goes. Now the next difference is going to be price tag. Right, we talked about some of the geometry measurements, pretty similar. The Tahoe is going to be $16.95 as of this recording, and the GT is going to be $26.95. Now we're going to get into the specs, and you can decide if it's worth the extra $1,000 bucks for all of the upgrades that come with the GT versus the regular Tahoe. So let's get into those. Now for our first and maybe biggest difference between the two bikes is going to be our motor capacity. If you can tell, maybe you can't from this angle, but on the GT, the motor is bigger. That's because we've got 750 watt motor back here, and on the regular Tahoe, we've got a 500 watt motor. So you're getting 250 watts of power extra when you go to the GT. And as far as performance goes, It does feel like the GT has a little bit more get up and go, but top speed wise, you're gonna get 3-4 miles an hour extra out of the GT for that. But on the low end, with some of that torque and the get up and go, like I mentioned, it seems like the GT does have the Tahoe beat, but they are both fairly comfortable. Seems like some really good curves as far as like the torque goes. So both of these bikes are pretty easy to ride, but the GT kind of edges out a little bit when you get into like which one's a little bit more sporty. The next point of comparison is going to be the batteries. So stock with the Tahoe comes a 14.5 amp hour battery, and we can check that down here, 14.5 amp hours. It does have the option to upgrade to a 20 amp hour battery, but stock, the 20 amp hour battery is what comes on the GT. So GT comes with a 20, our regular Tahoe comes with a 14.5. You can, like I said, you could throw on the 20 amp hour battery, get some more range, get very similar range to the GT, but 20 amp hour comes stock over here. So now as far as range goes, you're looking at 55 to 75 miles, kind of depending on, it's a pretty big range, but it really depends on how you ride it on the 20 amp hour. And then you're probably looking anywhere between 45 to 65 for the 14.5 amp hour battery. The next point we can compare is the brakes. So on the regular Tahoe, we're talking about our blue bike here, these are our Tektro Auriga brakes, and these are great. They are 2-piston. They're definitely nicer than really most of the e-bikes that you've seen, especially for that price point of $16.95. Not a lot of bikes are coming with these. These are the e-comp version, so they are made for e-bikes, and really the difference there is they've got this motor cutoff cable here so that when you pull the brake, you are going to cut off power to the motor, so the motor's not fighting against the physical brakingness of the bike. So that is cool to see these on here. Coming down here, we have got 203mm rotors, and that's going to give us tons of braking distance, or tons of braking surface rather. And normally we're seeing, 180s is kind of the standard. There are some brands that are starting to adopt a larger 203mm rotor, but a lot of them are still at the 180s. We see some 160s every once in a while, but it is cool that they went the extra mile and gave us the 203s on here. So that is going to mean we've got more braking area here, more braking surface, more for those 2 pistons to grab onto, and so the braking here is going to be really safe and pretty powerful when you hammer down on those. Moving over to the GT, these comes with Tektro Dorado brakes. These are a 4-piston brake, definitely much higher quality, got a nice look to it. Down here at the bottom, again, we've got those big 203mm rotors, and then our 4-piston brake calipers over here. So as far as braking goes, the GT definitely has the Tahoe beat if we're comparing these. But if we're comparing the Tahoe to pretty much anything that's in that price range, the Tahoe's still going to come out on top because we've got these nicer Tektro brakes here. So both these bikes stop really, really well, but if we were putting them head to head, and that's kind of what this video is all about, the GT version has better brakes, more pistons, more stopping power. The next thing we'll talk about is comfort, and the main way we're going to do that and the main way we're going to differentiate these two is going to be our front forks here. So on this side, we've got RST guide forks, we've got lockout preload adjustment. You can really dial these in for your ride, your terrain. Now with these tires, they are a street tire, very nice 4-inch street tires here, and you're probably not going to do a whole lot of off-roading with it, but it is nice to know that if you're going to hit the hard-packed dirt every once in a while, that these are going to do a really good job here. Going over to the regular Tahoe, there's nothing to talk about. We've got rigid forks here, so you're not going to get all that suspension. Nothing at all, really. So another difference, if we're talking about comfort up in the cockpit, having front forks is definitely going to be an advantage for the GT versus our regular Tahoe here. Moving on to the back, we're still talking about suspension. We've got our Suntour NCX back here. Now this seat post is a very nice seat post. It is not as expensive as a Cane Creek or Connect or something like that. But personally, we see these on a lot of bikes. U-Freeze has those on there. Mach Wheel comes with if you get the accessory package, comes with an unbranded, but it's basically a Suntour NCX post. Those are really nice. It seems like a lot of people really like that. I like those, so not really a big deal. It's not something more expensive, more outrageous. I think these do a really, really good job. And on this side, on our Tahoe, we have got a vertical suspension seat post. So you are going to get some suspension here, but comparing them apples to apples, the Suntour is going to be a lot more comfortable than something like this. But this is definitely better than a straight seat post. So because we don't have any suspension in the front over here, it is nice that we do have some cushion, here in the back. The other difference is going to be with our saddles. So this is a E-LUX branded saddle, still a pretty wide, pretty comfortable saddle, which is good for a cruiser type of setup. But comparing that to the Surface saddle with gel and, you know, it's like a memory foam mattress over here, this one is super comfortable. I like it. Now when it comes to saddles, it really has to do with your sit bones and how you fit on it. But for me, this one fits pretty well. The other one fits pretty well too, but again, this is a comparison video, and the upgraded saddle here I think is definitely worth it. So as far as comfort goes, I would say the GT wins again. But if we were comparing, you know, the Tahoe to something else in the industry, something, you know, similar, it still has a leg up there. So by no means is the Tahoe any inferior to, you know, other e-bikes. I think it's right on par, has some really good upgrades compared to the industry. But when you're looking at the GT version, it's got even more upgrades, and it's even more, you know, better. It's mo better, this one. So that was the suspension, kind of the comfort. Now let's go ahead and talk about some of the other differences here. The other main difference, and it'll be hard to just talk about it, so I'll probably overlay some ride footage here. With our GT, we're gonna get a top speed of 28 miles per hour, and then with our regular Tahoe, we're gonna get a top speed of 25 miles per hour. Now, that is the difference between a 500 watt motor and a 750 watt motor to a certain extent. Are there 500 watt motors that go 28? Yes, but this one, the way it comes, it maxes out right there around the 25, 26 miles per hour, whereas this one is a standard class 3. We got the throttle on both these bikes. So this is gonna be a standard class 3. It goes up to 28 miles per hour with pedal assist. And that is pretty much, as far as comparing things goes, the differences between the two bikes. So if you are somebody who's looking for comfort, you got the saddle, you got the suspension here. If you're somebody who's looking for range, we get more range here out of the box. And if you're looking for stopping power and you feel more comfortable with that, we do have better brakes here on the GT. So is it worth the extra $1,000 at the time of this recording? That's up to you. But those are the main differences between the Tahoe GT and our regular Tahoe. All right, guys, that is going to do it for our comparison video between the Tahoe and the Tahoe GT. If you want to know more about either of those bikes, we are going to be doing full in-depth reviews on each of those coming out in the next week or so. So stay tuned. If you're not subscribed, subscribe. You get a notification that, hey, they put something new out. It's probably these reviews. And love talking to you guys. And we'll catch you on the next one.